On today's edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, we'll be discussing the Florida Panthers' 6-2 loss against the Calgary Flames in Alberta. We're going to discuss what went wrong. And for the Panthers, this was over from the start. On this Winans Wednesday edition, Jacob and I, we might have a lot to say, so tune in.
Your Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
And welcome into this Wednesday, November 30th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez, and you can follow me on Twitter at MondoMan12. Follow the show account on Twitter at LO_FLA Panthers. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey with Flip Livingstone and Steel Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. And don't forget to also screenshot your subscription to the Locked On Florida Panthers YouTube page and your 5-star rating on whichever podcast app you listen to Locked On Panthers, and send it to me over at LO_FLA Panthers on Twitter, or you could email it to me at lockedonflapanthers@gmail.com for your chance to win 2 free tickets to the Florida Panthers versus New Jersey Devils game on December 21st at FLA Live Arena. So, Cats fans, second end of a back-to-back. You would think that the Florida Panthers would have more of a jump to their game, because as we spoke about on Monday, as far as deserving a point in Edmonton, maybe the Florida Panthers deserved 0 in that one, but definitely in Calgary deserved all zeros for this one. There was really nothing great about this game for the Panthers. They were giving up so many rushes. The goaltending was just out of position, and especially on the fourth one, a very embarrassing goal by Sergei Bobrovsky. And even with the Panthers getting it down to a 2-goal deficit, I never really saw the Panthers really giving themselves a chance to come out of this one, especially with a majority of the opponent's shots on goals being not on 5-on-5. And this will be a good time for me to bring in my guest on the show. Of course, it is a Winans Wednesday edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. And Jacob, it's been a roller coaster of emotions since the last time you were on, because the last time you were on, we were previewing the home game against Boston, but then that win happens, 2 straight collapses, and then this Panthers team just flat out not showing up on Tuesday night against Calgary.
Yeah, so I came into the game tonight feeling pretty good off of the Team USA World Cup win, like we were just talking about before recording. So I was hoping the good feelings would continue. Maybe split the season series with Calgary 1-1, and could not have been more disappointed in that one. They came out flat. Sergei Bobrovsky was just, he was honestly horrendous in this game. There's really nothing else I can say about it. I'm trying to think of a word to put it more mildly, but it was just a terrible performance in goal, especially that fourth goal. I feel like that one broke the team's back. They were pushing. They were starting to make a little bit of a comeback. It felt like the offense was starting to get there. There were some good shifts going. You've got a chance to get back in it, and then just an inexcusable, probably the worst goal he's given up all season, possibly one of the worst he's given up as a Panther. That one, you'd like to have that back, but you can't let that one in. Sam Reinhart scores right afterwards, which honestly, if that goal doesn't go in, the bad one that he gives up to Brett Ritchie, if that one doesn't go in, it's a 3-2 game off of that Reinhart goal with a whole period plus to get back in it. I feel like it's a totally different game if that doesn't happen, but can't only blame goaltending because it has been the last 2 games where the defense has just been in shambles. Spencer Knight was just absolutely under duress the entire game against Edmonton. We were very lucky to even get a point. We were 4 seconds away from getting 2. And that win, if we had gotten that win, would have purely been off of Spencer Knight's back. The 1 point we got was completely a credit to Spencer Knight. And the game before that, I mean, the third period collapse, overtime, 2 games in a row, just get absolutely blitzed in overtime and look like they had no idea what was happening. It's just the last 3 games coming off that win against Boston. I tweeted about it and we talked about it. That win against Boston, you're hoping, beat the best team in the league. That's a big win heading into the road trip. You can build off of it. It's the type of culture setting win you need for your season. But if anything, it's been the complete opposite since that win. There's been nothing positive to take from anything we've seen since that game. So it's unfortunate. And tonight was probably the tip of the iceberg. It was bad all around. There were no positives in this game at all.
None absolutely. And I mean, when you think about all 6 of the goals, let's just break down period by period. I mean, 3:05 in the first period, and turnover, and Andrew Mangiapane just gets right by Aaron Ekblad, and then a rush to Devin Dubé, and then on the 2-on-1 to beat Sergei Bobrovsky, and then of course Radko Gudas, not his best game. I mean, such a great start to the season for Radko Gudas, but then you see all the silly penalties that he took today. Puck over glass, and I think his second penalty was really the biggest backbreaker for the Panthers. It's because that's when you were holding the Calgary Flames to really one shot on goal through the first 7 minutes of the second period. The Florida Panthers got their first goal around that time, and then just that penalty by Radko Gudas. At the second one was just a backbreaker, and then with that second one and the second goal, but you could argue that maybe Mangiapane didn't allow Sergei Bobrovsky to get right back up, but I still think that there was still time for Bob to get a little set, and it wasn't that. I think it was a little bit of a love tap by Mangiapane, and then of course Matthew Tkachuk, last time these two faced in South Florida, he got a goal against the Flames, and then this time it was Jonathan Huberdeau on that second one. So each is a little even when it comes to getting on the score sheet.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. Towards the end of the game, I heard the Calgary's crowd is not exactly the most rowdy in the league, but you could clearly hear on the broadcast Hubie's better chants raining down from their stands, and you can't argue with it, honestly. Nothing against Tkachuk, because he's definitely, hands down, been the Panthers' best player all season. At times, he's carried the whole team. But I can understand Calgary's feelings towards Tkachuk and the situation, and they do have bragging rights now because they've beaten us both times this year. They're 2-0 against the Panthers, and that won't change until next season at least, because we don't play Calgary again this year. So it's unfortunate that Calgary got the best of the Panthers twice this year, both within just a couple of weeks apart. And the first one could have gone either way. Just a really kind of abysmal shootout performance from the Panthers in that one. But tonight's game, it was never in question. I mean, they came out, controlled the game from puck drop. We gave up a shorthanded goal. We got scored on the power play. Got scored on multiple times with even strength. I mean, you get beat in all 3 phases like that. You have no chance. And Calgary really took it to us tonight. That's been the case the past few games. It's just been defensive breakdown after defensive breakdown. The offense isn't putting it together. The power play is coming alive at times, but it seems like we're still missing on the power plays where we need a goal. We're not getting the timely ones. And another big issue with that is losing the faceoff immediately to start the power play, wasting 30 seconds to get set up, and then by the time they get set up, get their first shot on goal, half of it's gone. You're rolling the second unit out there. I mean, it's just breakdown after breakdown. There's really nothing positive to take from the last couple of games. And the schedule, like you said, pre-recording, it's not getting any easier. Seattle is a team that, they're an expansion team. Everyone kind of looks at them as an easy win sometimes just because they're such a new franchise and they struggled last year, but that's a good team this season. Winnipeg is a team we have on this trip. They just beat Colorado 5-0 tonight. And Vancouver, while they have struggled to start the year, they've played a little bit more even hockey lately, and that's a team with a lot of talent. And we're vulnerable right now, so they could see that as an opportunity to jump on a team that's not playing well. And again, we don't know when Barkov is going to be back. His illness, very few details on it. It's been kind of a mysterious situation, given that he was sick, came back, played, looked 100%, put up 3 points against Boston, and then is sick again. I mean, just on a personal level, I hope whatever his illness is not anything super dangerous or detrimental to his health. I hope his health is okay. But it's an unfortunate time for the captain to be out because the team is reeling and the captain's not on the ice right now playing, and we have to hope he gets back soon.
Yeah, and we'll continue the conversation on the captain. We'll continue actually the conversation on the faceoff because those are definitely very eyeing stats based on where the Panthers are this season. So we're going to transition over to segment number 2, but first we're going to tell you all about BetOnline. And BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get all the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from football, basketball, soccer, and esports. We've got it all at BetOnline. And if you love sports podcasts, you can find those at BetOnline as well. We're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. So Jacob, on some of the power plays that the Florida Panthers were having, losing the faceoffs, we spoke about losing 30 seconds at least on the draw. I mean, the final numbers had the Calgary Flames 62.7 to Panthers 37.3 in the dot on Tuesday night, and this is where. And even with the shot advantage being where it was for the discrepancy between the Panthers and the Flames. I mean, if you look at all 6 of the goals, none of them were the Calgary Flames working the puck around. I mean, the third goal, it was the Calgary Flames creating it on the forecheck, and then double deflection. Bob saves it first, but then unable to get reset, and Anderson gets it in. And we spoke about how embarrassing that fourth goal was for Sergei Bobrovsky on Brett Ritchie. And then the last two, I mean, cool. He makes a save on Jonathan Huberdeau towards the end of the game, and then Tyler Toffoli is there to finish. And of course, I wasn't even, honestly, after the 6th goal where it was 2-0, where Mangiapane scores. I wasn't even at that point. I wasn't even fazed by it. The game was over. It's like, well, that was the story of the day. That was the story of the night. Odd man rushes. And it's funny because the Florida Panthers had 0 in period 1, and they had 4 in period 2. The sense of urgency, we really started to see it in the second period. We saw a lot of physicality from, of course, Radko Gudas, as always. Patrick Hornquist and even Jonathan Huberdeau went to the box for cross-checking each other. Crazy to see 2 ex-teammates for the last few years, and then no love lost when they go on the ice as opponents now. But just when you look at all of those goals, it isn't really anything like really of like a set play for Calgary, and it's just like just straight up the Florida Panthers just shooting themselves in the foot.
Yeah, and that points to a couple of things, because it's not, the Panthers aren't losing for a lack of talent. They're not losing for a lack of anything personnel wise that other teams have that the Panthers don't. We're not getting beat by guys who are in another class of skill or talent than what the Panthers have. The Panthers have a talented roster. We make no mistake about that. They have a very talented roster that can compete with the top half of the league, the top tier of contenders. We've seen them put it together a couple of times. We've seen them take a game to Boston. We've seen them hang right with Tampa until the very end with an unlucky penalty call. We've seen them win some really, really big games against some really good teams this season. And it just seems like it's when they lose, it's not so much being outclassed. It's just making so many mental mistakes, the costly penalties at horrible times, the blown defensive coverages, losing faceoffs, which are fundamental. They have to at least break even in the faceoff circle. We've got a guy in Eric Stahl, for example, we kept him over Rudolph Balcers simply because of his faceoff talent. And we're getting caved in a game 65-35. I mean, these are decisions that if you make these decisions, they have to pay off, and they're not right now in the faceoff. Is losing key draws. Anton Lundell has been brutal in the faceoff circle at times. He's supposed to take a big step forward. At the end of the day, these are the guys that are going to be playing this season. There's no big solution walking through the door. These are the guys that are going to have to work it out. They're going to have to win those draws. They're going to have to clean up the mental errors. And if they don't, they're gonna be on the outside looking in when it comes to playoff time, because the way they're trending right now, it's all trending in the wrong direction. And there's no big trade deadline addition coming to bail them out of it. This is what we have. This is what we're gonna have. This is what we're gonna have. The solutions have to come internally. They have to come from within. And right now, I'm not seeing a ton of signs of it. We're now 0-4 this year with Barkov out of the lineup. I want to say 2 of those were OT losses, 0-2-2, but either way, 0 wins with Barkov out of the lineup. You can't only depend on your captain. This is a game where Barkov's playing 20 plus minutes a night. He's going to get dinged up. He's going to be at less than 100% some nights. He's going to not play some nights. That's just the nature of this sport. If you can't win without him, then you're going to be in some trouble, especially given the fact that Barkov is not a guy who usually plays 82 games. Not a knock on him, but he puts himself in every situation on the ice where sometimes he picks up some of those injuries because he eats up huge minutes for a forward. So there's just not a lot. There's not a lot of lights at the end of the tunnel right now with what I'm seeing in the style of play. And again, another thing you mentioned was the odd man rushes. In this game, the Panthers honestly were pretty comparable to what Calgary had in odd man rushes, but the Panthers didn't even get shots on theirs. I mean, I saw Eric Stahl and Alexi Heponiemi 2-on-1. The puck never even gets near the net. I saw Sam Reinhart and Anton Lundell have a great opportunity. Puck doesn't even get to the net. I saw at least 3 or 4 2-on-1s, 3-on-2s. We even had a 2-on-0 with Nick Cousins, and I want to say it was Sam Reinhart. Either Reinhart or Colin White had a 2-on-0. Don't even get a shot on goal. So if you want to compete in these games, especially with Barkov on the shelf for a few days, those are the ones you have to bury. If you have a 2-on-1, a 2-on-0, 3-on-2, that puck has to get to the net, and not even getting shots on goal on those, you're not even giving yourself a chance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the official record for the Florida Panthers without Aleksander Barkov, because he did miss the Carolina game that they did get a win, but that was non-related to the COVID illness. So 1-2-2 is the official record for the Panthers. And the Bally Sports broadcast even showed the goals for and goals against per game with or without Barkov since the start of 21-22. But even throughout the last few games, you've had chances. Of course, on Tuesday, this was lost from the start. There's no signs of the Panthers coming back. But even previously, you had chances to cut. You had leads. You had chances to get there. Yeah, Barkov is gonna bring you a lot actually back. When he does come back, he's gonna put less pressure on someone like Sam Bennett in the dot too. Of course, Barkov a 55% plus from the dot, but it just can't be him alone doing it. And even at times, Aleksander Barkov has disappears too. So it's not like him coming back is going to solve every single problem for the Panthers.
Yeah, it can't just be Barkov. I mean, he's at the end of the day, he's your best player by far, but even your best player can only play 20 to 25 minutes of a 60-minute game. So that no matter how you slice it, the majority of the game is played without Barkov on the ice. And if the group we have right now is not responding well, they're not performing well with Barkov off the ice, whether that's for 40 minutes or whether that's the entire 60, you're going to be in trouble. He can't be a one-man team. Hockey is a sport where you can't have a LeBron who just carries you through the season. I mean, everyone has to pull their weight. Everyone has to eat up minutes. Everyone has to contribute in those minutes. And right now, if they're looking this lost without Barkov, him coming back, it helps, but it doesn't solve everything, especially defensively. He adds so much defensively as a forward, but he's not playing on that decor. Barkov coming back is not going to all of a sudden stop Aaron Ekblad from getting walked when he's the top defenseman on the team. It's not going to suddenly make Mark Stahl's breakout passes find their target. He's not going to stop Radko Gudas from taking terrible penalties at inopportune times. These are the things that have to get cleaned up, and that goes beyond Barkov being in or out of the lineup. These are guys who individually are not doing their job to the best of their abilities and what we've seen them do. It's not like they don't have it in them. We've seen them do it. It's just for whatever reason, it's not clicking this year, and Barkov is not the one man answer. And obviously, in a few weeks, we're anticipating getting Anthony Duclair back in some way. I'm not sure how, depending on the cap situation and the reports about Hornquist, which that's another topic. But I mean, the Duclair, Barkov, they're going to help, but it's not going to fix everything. It's just not.
Yeah, and going back to the decor and Aaron Ekblad, it's very concerning, the play of Aaron Ekblad. I mean, he was a -3 yesterday against the Edmonton Oilers, and then tonight a -2, and multiple times is he just losing the puck or losing his man, allowing a rush. And there's only so much mobility a player can have when they suffer so many lower body injuries. I mean, this is 3 in the last 3 seasons for Ekblad now, and just I mean, he won't be up for a new contract for a while, and it's weird that I'm even thinking about this, but it's just, how much do you entertain when that contract is up of bringing him back, or for how much term or how much of a cap hit? Because for a while, I mean, even now, there's still some value in his contract at 7.5 when he first signed his extension in 2016. But man, those injuries are the injuries, and then sometimes him getting walked, like you mentioned earlier, is just it's now starting to catch up to him.
Yeah, the injury history is a major concern, especially when it's all centralized to the lower body. And we remember earlier in his career, he had major concussion issues, had several concussions within a couple season span, which thankfully, and knock on wood, that's no longer the problem. It's a series of lower body injuries, but at his relatively young age, he does have a lot of mileage on him for a defenseman of his age, just given that he broke in at 18 years old. But with that said, the injuries are piling up, and it is something to watch now, because we can't be sure if it's just him having a new D partner, a new system, whatever the case may be, but something doesn't look right with Aaron Ekblad. What we've seen from him the last 2+ years, where he's been a top 10 defenseman in the NHL, he doesn't exactly look close to that right now. Now maybe it's a matter of getting back in the groove, because of course he hasn't played nearly as many games as anyone else on the roster this season. So he may still be finding his rhythm, but it's got to happen now, because he is the unquestioned number 1 defenseman on this team. Brandon Montour is kind of saddled right now with Mark Stahl as a partner, so you can't expect Montour to keep doing what he had been doing. You definitely can't entertain putting Ekblad with Stahl, because that's arguably your 2 least mobile defensemen on a pair together. Mark Stahl, and there's no disrespect to Mark Stahl personally, because he's had a tremendous career, and the issues we're seeing with him are mostly just because he's played so long, and he shouldn't be asked to have the role he has right now. But the guy currently has he's got the mobility of a school bus. I mean, he has a hard time getting around and getting on his edges and stuff, and it's just comes with the territory of playing over 1,000 games and really difficult role that he's played in his career. So you can't put him with Ekblad. It's two guys who aren't very mobile. So Ekblad's got to figure this out on the top pair with Forsling. It has to work out somehow. And I don't know if it's injury related, if it's just getting acclimated to the new system, getting his legs back under him, but something it just doesn't look right. The turnovers, the slow-footed recoveries, getting walked. I mean, tonight he got beat one-on-one by Nikita Zadorov. I mean, that's a big concern. Zadorov is, 6'6", well over 200 pounds, one of the least mobile defensemen in hockey. That is a slow man, and Ekblad got cooked, and it cost us a penalty at the end. It's a cause for concern, no question about it.
Which Mahura might have saved the goal on that one on that penalty, which Mahura ended up going to the box. But we're gonna transition over to segment number 3, where we're gonna, I guess, look ahead. Not looking forward to looking ahead after the first 2 games, and we're gonna discuss more of that, and maybe even talk about the goaltending as well. We're gonna discuss that next, and here on this edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast.
Your Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Third and final segment of this Wednesday, November 30th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Got Jacob Winans here. And Jacob, so doesn't get any easier from here. We spoke about earlier about Vancouver finding a little bit of a groove before dropping a few games, but it's crazy. You know what averages the most goals per game since January 1st of 2022? Goals per game, not points, goals.
Who would that be?
Say again?
Who's averaging the most goals per game?
Bo Horvat.
Bo Horvat. Wow.
Mm-hmm. He has the most goals in most goals per game in the NHL since that time. Doesn't get any easier. There's drama with the contract as far as whether he's going to get re-signed or not. They re-signed JT Miller. A lot of bad contracts on the Vancouver Canucks. Spencer and Martin has looked to have gotten more starts for the Vancouver Canucks. Thatcher Demko hasn't looked like his normal self. That's the next opponent, and a lot of trouble off the ice with a possible suit as well, lawsuit to the Vancouver Canucks as well, and the fact that Jim Rutherford didn't hire Bruce Boudreau as the coach too. So this is an opportunity for the Panthers to get 2 points, but even then, just based on this season that it has been for the Panthers, even saying, yeah, this is an opportunity for 2 points, but even talking about other teams that are flawed, and just knowing that the Florida Panthers are just as flawed and right back to where they were pre-President's Trophy as far as records. So not a given 2 points even here Thursday night against Vancouver. Yeah,
we've seen losses to Philly, Chicago, Arizona. I mean, we've lost to some bad teams. We've seen a 4-1 lead blown against St. Louis. There are no givens. Now, Vancouver is definitely a team that has some major issues, but like you said, Bo Horvat is elite. He's an elite talent. Elias Pettersson's on that team. That's a team that has some offensive firepower. JT Miller. That's a team that can score. Quinn Hughes, exactly. So that's a team that's mobile. They're young, they're fast, they have goal scoring ability. Maybe a little flawed defensively, but it's not like the Panthers are lighting the world on fire on the offensive end right now. It's especially if Barkov doesn't play, we're going to struggle to contain Bo Horvat. I think he's definitely one of the most underrated players in hockey. That dude is spectacular. But their forward core, we don't match up well, especially if Barkov is not in the lineup. Spencer Martin, obviously he's not a household name, but if you do remember, he stood on his head and took the Panthers all the way to a shootout last year and barely lost that one. It was a absolutely ridiculous Barkov shootout goal, one-hander that beat him last year. So that's not an easy game by any means. Vancouver is a very rowdy building to play in. And then beyond that, you get Seattle, who is scoring a ton of goals lately. And then you've got Winnipeg. Paul Maurice's return to Winnipeg, and Winnipeg has been excellent to start this year. So this road trip, it is a tough stretch. You need Barkov back as soon as possible, and buckle up and hope for the best, because it is not an easy stretch of games here, and coming back home doesn't get any easier either. Detroit is a lot better this season. That's the first game back off the road trip, and Tampa is just a couple days after that. So it's a tough road ahead for sure.
Yeah, and Paul Maurice did speak about the status of Aleksander Barkov. Didn't really give too many details, not that we're surprised, but just spoke about how he feels better about where Aleksander Barkov is, and trying to kind of read the tea leaves there. He's feeling better, but do you think I'm going to ask you, do you think Aleksander Barkov makes the trip to BC to play against the Vancouver Canucks?
I do not. I think at the earliest we maybe see Barkov in Seattle. But to be completely honest with you, I'm not certain we see him at all on this trip. I would not be at all shocked if Barkov doesn't play again until December 8th against Detroit, back at home. But at the earliest, I think probably Seattle. If it gets to a situation where it gets to the Seattle game and he hasn't played yet, I don't see them putting Barkov on a plane just for one game in Winnipeg just to come right back home. So I don't think he plays in Vancouver. I think maybe Seattle, and then if not Seattle, it's Detroit, back at home. So I would not anticipate number 16 back in the lineup against the Canucks. I think we're going to have to roll with what we have.
Yeah, I'm thinking along the same lines, and with how crunched up also these games are, with of course the back-to-back Monday, Tuesday, of course only a plane ride to BC, which the Panthers, of course, me having a relationship with the PR department, they do send me the practice schedule for the Panthers. So the Panthers, their practice throughout this road trip won't come until Monday, the day before they face against Winnipeg. So every day throughout the rest of the trip until after the Seattle game, it's this back-to-back off days for travel. The plays Vancouver, off day for travel to Seattle, even though it's not that far of a trip, and then the day off on the Sunday. So it's a lot for these players right now, and it's definitely and when you don't have your captain to travel out there, and it's a mental toll to try to fly cross country as well, to put on the skates after everything that Barkov might be going through off the ice, regardless of what the speculations are, which once again, we don't go into people's personal lives here. So it's gonna be a tall order even for Barkov if he does make the trip. So even if he does return, I'm not gonna be expecting Barkov to just fully take over right away if he does, because of what he might be going through.
I agree. I think especially any illness that's capable of keeping you out for the amount of time he's been out already, and it sounds like he's not even at 100% yet, because if you listen to what Paul Maurice said, He said he's feeling better than he was yesterday, but he's still not. It's still not he's good to go. He's feeling a little better. We feel better about where he is now than we did before. It sounds like a situation where they've been keeping tabs on him for a number of days and hoping he gets better. So any illness that you're dealing with that lingers for that long, it can't be good. It's definitely something that's taking a physical toll on him. The kind of travel with that, especially to a different time zone, all the way out to the West Coast, that's a lot to ask coming right off of an illness. And then, definitely don't want to dive into any personal life things, but if there's some off the ice things going on, always want to give life comes before hockey, of course. If there's things that Barkov is working through, best to let him do that as well. So it's obviously you need the captain back as soon as possible. He's the engine of this team, but if he's not able to be back on this trip, or if he's not able to be back for the next game, whatever the amount of time is, you've got to find a way to come up with 2 points in his absence. As a player, you at least owe that to your captain. I mean, if he can't be there with you, this is Aleksander Barkov we're talking about. He lives and breathes hockey. He doesn't not want to be on the ice. He's the hardest working guy on that roster. He wants to be on the ice every minute of every game if he could. So if he's not able to, it's clear there's something keeping him off the ice physically. He can't do it. If he's not there, it's because he can't. And the team owes it to the captain to find a way to get a couple of wins for him. So hopefully he's back as soon as possible on this trip. But if he's not, you have to find a way to get points in Vancouver. You have to find a way to at least come out of this trip with 500. Get out of this trip with at least five points somehow. Scrape out 5 points out of this trip. You break even on it. It's not ideal, but you move forward and your season isn't sunk just off of one road trip. So that's really what I'm looking for in Vancouver if Barkov's not on the ice for that one.
Yeah, and hopefully we do see the captain, and best wishes to him. That's for sure. On him feeling better, and the team has to. They have to roll with what they got, and regardless of captain or no captain, and very winnable game. But nothing, absolutely nothing is guaranteed for the Florida Panthers team as far as getting 2 points. But Jacob, I want to thank you so much once again for coming on this edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. This was definitely a very frustrating one for the Cats as they drop a game that it was not even close, and momentum killer after momentum killer for silly penalties, odd man rushes, and untimely goaltending for the Cats. When you come back next week, we'll be wrapping up the road trip. It's crazy to think that the Florida Panthers will be gone for that long outside of South Florida. So we'll be recapping the Winnipeg game next week on Winans Wednesday. But thanks, man. I want to say legitimately thank you for staying up with me. Most importantly, as well. Thank you. But tell everybody where they can follow you online.
Yeah, you can follow me online at Jacob Winans 8 on Twitter. Not a problem. Happy to stay up. And even though the result wasn't what we wanted, always happy to watch and recap some Panthers hockey. And hopefully next week we're talking about a whole different vibe after the end of this road trip. Hopefully we're in a better position than we are right now. So always a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Jacob, and I'll see you next week.
Sounds good.
And if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey with Flip Livingstone and Stu Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. And for your second listen of the day, make sure to listen to today's episode of Locked On Sports Today. Locked On Sports Today gives you a daily 20-minute or less podcast on the entirety of the sports scene, where they will bring in local experts for analysis and the take of the day. Locked On Sports Today, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. So I'm Armando Velez with Jacob Winans, and you've been listening to the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.